You have some exciting news in terms of electrification, kind of a different spin than other automakers have even put on it. But I have to ask you first about trade. As Francine said, it's really overshadowed this show, the possibility of a trade war. How do you react?
Well, personally, I think the best thing to do is not to react, because we're talking about a tweet which is somehow contradictory to other messages we're getting. And there is so many things happening in the world. Brexit is an obsession among people, and you have people speculating this, that, and the other. Based on a tweet, I think I prefer not to speculate. Just get on and do the business.
We do know, though, that the president wants to put tariffs on steel and aluminum. These are two products, actually, obviously, that you have to buy in bulk for your business. What does that mean for raw materials costs? Are you concerned that prices need to go up?
Again, if it happens, obviously the raw material price goes up. In our kind of business, that gets passed through to the customer, and that would be true for something being supplied from anywhere in the world. So ultimately, the customer pays. What
kind of price elasticity are you dealing with? I mean, these are not $50,000 cars. These are, the ultimate luxury, the apex predator of sports cars. Do your customers react if they have to pay, say, $350 instead of $325?
No, not so much. I mean, there will be. There is. I mean, everybody resents paying too much, right? Particularly when it's in tax. But some of the places that we sell to, you have a doubling of the price simply because of taxes. So people want an Aston Martin. They're generally going to have an Aston Martin, and the sensitivity is not that great.
Investors seem to want to have an Aston Martin. There's a lot of talk about the possibility of an IPO. Everyone's excited, having seen so much value placed on Ferrari. When do you expect to be able to tell us your IPO plans?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, we have moved on. I mean, normally I'd say to you that's a matter for the shareholders. But of late, the shareholders have asked me to study the various options, which includes an IPO. And my plan is to get back to them in the days and weeks with the various options that they have. Don't know when they'll decide. That's always the prerogative of a shareholder. He can sell when he wants, but at least he'll have the options in front of them and can decide, what works for them.
What kind of price would you put on Aston Martin? What kind of value do you think this company has?
Well, it's a growing value as we grow in size and stature and launch all of our new cars. But I don't think it's appropriate to put a number on it. Only perhaps to point to the multiple on EBITDA that you see from Ferrari.
Let's talk about Lagonda. So Lagonda is historically an Aston Martin brand, part of Aston Martin?
Well, no, it was actually formed in 1904 by an American, Mr. Gunn, who also doubled as an opera singer, just for your trivia quiz. And it was an independent company all the way up until David Brown bought the company, bought both together and bought them together. It's had checkered success over the years. You'll remember in the 70s it did very well with the wedge, as we internally called it.
It was a love-hate thing. You either love the car or you hate the Aston Martin Lagonda was this wedge-shaped, very squarish, stark design.
Exactly.
And now you're going to make a completely new brand out of it for Aston Martin.
Exactly. So the Phoenix is back. It's brought up from the ashes, and we're making what I think is distinguishing us from the other guys around us, because we're not saying here's an electric car in the range. What we're saying is Lagonda equals EV. Every car that Lagonda makes from now on will be electric.
Very interesting, and obviously the topic of this show is electrification because customers want it. Is that what you're understanding?
There's two forces. One is legislation demands that to meet the future CAFE regulations, particularly in our case where we've decided to continue making V12s, we need a big offset. So you have that regulatory pressure on one side, and now you're just starting to see electric vehicles gaining traction with consumer, and that starts to become interesting. And we're a company that makes hard choices. We're a small company, so we have to make hard choices, and that's why we decided to back the EV revolution.
I could spend an hour talking about the Volante and the new Vantage coming out, but I've got to ask about this Formula One car behind you.
Yes.
It's sort of a re-entry for Aston Martin into the league. 600 million people watch Formula One every week. It's expensive, but what kind of sales do you expect to generate from it?
Always very difficult to give an exact number, but most definitely you're increasing awareness, particularly in places like China and hopefully the United States. More people that know about your brand, remember what your brand is, the more they become familiar, the more that your sales grow. Now remember, we're only capable of making 7,000 cars a year, and we hit that buffer at the second half of this year. So essentially, not only are you driving volume to some extent, but it also allows you to avoid discounting. It improves your residual values. Good for the company, good for the consumer.